Old partners and BRICS buddies, India and South Africa, both have been hit hard by Trump's tariffs. South Africa faces a 30% duty, the highest in Africa, and India faces 50%, the highest in the world.
South Africa and India just flipped the global trade game upside down right after the United States shocked the world with a wave of new tariffs. What looked like an economic setback has turned into one of the biggest strategic wins of the year. Two rising powers have joined forces, unlocked massive new opportunities, and sent a clear message across the world. The future of global trade is changing fast. And the United States is feeling the impact.
Global trade has entered a turbulent new era, and two emerging powers have just delivered one of the most dramatic economic moves of the year. South Africa and India have forged a strengthened trade alliance that is reshaping markets, sending a clear message to the world, and creating significant consequences for the United States. What began as a sudden wave of tariff increases has evolved into one of the most important strategic partnerships on the international stage, turning pressure into opportunity and disruption into transformation. The shift began when the United States implemented wide-ranging tariff hikes meant to shield domestic industries and reset trade balances. These tariffs were applied across multiple sectors, affecting exports from countries around the globe. The decision marked a major departure from decades of gradual liberalization, shaking long-standing trade relationships and forcing governments to quickly reassess their economic strategies. The impact hit particularly hard in places where key exports relied heavily on access to the United States market. Goods became more expensive, demand slowed, and companies that had built their supply chains around predictable access were suddenly facing an unpredictable future. South Africa was among the countries that felt the shock immediately. Its exports in manufacturing, agriculture, and mineral-based sectors became less competitive almost overnight. The automotive industry, which had long benefited from strong demand in the United States, saw shipment numbers weaken as tariffs cut into profit margins. Agricultural producers braced for declining sales. Officials publicly argued that the data used to justify the tariffs did not reflect the realities of bilateral trade, and warned that their economy was being unfairly disadvantaged. The country began exploring ways to redirect its export flows toward partners that offered stability rather than uncertainty. India, a major global exporter with a wide trade footprint, also experienced the impact as duties increased across products ranging from chemicals to textiles. Businesses that depended on the United States market faced rising costs and shrinking competitiveness. Yet the reaction within India was noticeably strategic rather than confrontational. Economic leaders described the situation not only as a challenge, but as a chance to diversify global connections and strengthen resilience. Rather than respond with retaliation, the country used the moment to accelerate partnerships with regions that offered long-term growth and predictable cooperation. This is what ultimately brought South Africa and India into closer alignment. The two nations had already maintained diplomatic, economic, and cultural ties through multilateral forums and long-standing cooperation agreements. The tariff crisis simply pushed both to act with greater speed and purpose. Instead of accepting reduced access to a single major market, they chose to expand access to each other's markets, creating a mutually beneficial pathway forward. The result was a rapid deepening of trade engagements, including formal agreements, expanded governmental consultations, and business-to-business initiatives designed to boost investment. Delegations moved between Pretoria and New Delhi with the express purpose of building new trade channels. Business chambers from both countries signed new cooperation frameworks. Ministries discussed faster customs processes, sector-specific exchanges, and long-term investment plans. South Africa began promoting opportunities in areas like mining, automotive manufacturing, agriculture, energy, and logistics. India pushed forward its strengths in technology, pharmaceuticals, engineering, and green industries. What emerged was a partnership that served the needs of both economies with remarkable precision. South Africa gained access to a vast, fast-growing market capable of absorbing the exports now facing barriers in the United States. Its mineral resources aligned with India's industrial goals, particularly in sectors that required reliable raw materials. Its manufacturing capabilities offered opportunities for joint ventures aimed at producing goods for wider African markets. The country also positioned itself as a gateway to the continent, a role it has increasingly embraced as Africa's international trade profile expands. Indian investors began evaluating new opportunities in South African manufacturing, logistics, and energy, recognizing the country as a launchpad rather than only a destination. India, in turn, found in South Africa the ideal partner for its broader Africa strategy. The country's trade with the continent had already crossed historic milestones, and South Africa represented both a logistical hub and a partner with established industrial capacity. By expanding trade in pharmaceuticals, automotive components, technology, and renewable energy systems, India secured a stable partner ready to collaborate on long-term development. Access to South African minerals, industrial inputs, and agricultural products also strengthened India's supply chain diversification strategy, reducing reliance on any single outside market. Economists across both regions have described this partnership as a model of strategic adaptation. Rather than allow tariffs from one global power to dictate their economic trajectories, South Africa and India chose a path defined by cooperation. Analysis from various think tanks highlights that diversified trade links reduce vulnerability to sudden external shocks and improve long-term economic stability. Researchers focusing on emerging market cooperation view this alliance as a powerful example of South economic integration, which many believe will define the next phase of global trade. Experts in international relations note that this development does more than shift trade patterns. It represents a broader geopolitical realignment in which new economic corridors are forming outside traditional power structures. The strengthened South Africa-India relationship reflects a world where developing nations increasingly build direct alliances with each other instead of relying on a limited number of major global powers. This pattern is emerging across Asia, Africa, and parts of Latin America, marking a transition toward a more multi-centered global economic system. The consequences for the United States are significant. The tariff measures created short-term leverage, but also incentivized major trading partners to accelerate diversification away from reliance on the United States market. South Africa, once a strong beneficiary of duty-free access under long-standing agreements, is now openly examining alternative export destinations as discussions continue over whether its preferential status will be renewed. The uncertainty has pushed the country to deepen ties not only with India, but with additional partners across Asia, the Middle East, and the African continent. India's response has contributed further to this shift. The country has been negotiating a broad range of trade agreements across different regions and is steadily reducing dependence on any single economic partner. While it continues to maintain diplomatic communication with the United States, it has made clear that its long-term strategy involves creating multiple strong trade relationships rather than relying primarily on one. Its growing footprint in African markets, combined with expanded cooperation with South Africa, signals a future where the global balance of trade is less concentrated and more widely distributed. Trade analysts observe that these moves present new diplomatic challenges for the United States. Maintaining constructive relationships with South Africa and India will now require rebuilding trust and providing clarity about long-term intentions. Many experts argue that sudden tariff increases carry risks beyond short-term economic pressure, as they can unintentionally accelerate the emergence of alternative trading blocs. The strengthened South Africa-India partnership is frequently cited as one of the most striking examples of this broader trend. Despite the geopolitical shifts, the story of this alliance is fundamentally about opportunity. South Africa and India have used a moment of global instability to create new openings for industries, workers, and investors. Businesses in both countries are already exploring ways to leverage the partnership to expand their reach. Industrial companies are looking at shared manufacturing ventures. Agricultural producers are examining new export channels. Technology firms are exploring pilot programs in digital services, sustainable energy, and logistics. There is also growing interest in cultural exchange, academic partnerships, and tourism links. The economic ties appear ready to expand into a broader relationship that strengthens people-to-people connections and builds long-term cooperation across multiple sectors. Observers believe this next phase will be defined not only by trade figures, but by collaborative innovation and shared development goals. What makes this alliance especially notable is that it reflects a wider shift in the global system. Countries are recognizing that resilience comes from diversified partnerships, balanced supply chains, and collaborative growth rather than over-reliance on a single major power. South Africa and India have positioned themselves at the forefront of this shift, demonstrating that proactive adaptation can convert economic pressure into strategic advantage. The strengthened South Africa-India trade partnership is more than a reaction to tariffs. It is a decisive move toward a future in which emerging powers build their own networks, define their own pathways, and shape the global economy from the ground up. The United States now faces the reality of a world in which influence is shared more widely, alliances are more flexible, and nations have more options than ever before. For South Africa and India, this moment is a clear victory. It showcases economic confidence, strategic foresight, and an ability to turn global challenges into opportunities that promise growth for decades to come. For the world, it is a reminder that the global trade landscape is shifting rapidly, and that cooperation between ambitious, forward-looking nations can reshape the future in ways once considered unlikely. If you want, I can also create a YouTube video script, voiceover version, thumbnail text ideas, or a short, dramatic summary for your video description.